Seth Lawrence, the WHOW Morning Show, streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin insurance agent in Clinton. My guest in this segment of the morning show is Mrs. Mary Vogt. She is the superintendent of Bement Schools. Mrs. Vogt, how are you today?
I am great, Seth. How are you today?
Doing well. How is school going for you over there in Bement? I know we're, 5, 6, maybe 7 weeks, if we want to stretch it out a little bit, into this school year. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. We're already we've already passed the midterm point of the quarter, and we'll soon be at the end of the quarter. We have parent-teacher conferences coming up in 2 weeks, and it is absolutely hard to believe we're almost a quarter of the way done with the year already.
Yeah, I can't believe it myself, but it's flying by for sure. And Mrs. Vogt, as we talk here for this morning, we're already talking about things like homecoming, which is just unbelievable. I know Bement had their homecoming, or do they have their homecoming coming up? I can't remember what you told me off the air. Forgive me for that.
Our homecoming was last week. We had our parade last Friday. Bonfire, all of that last Wednesday, football game Friday evening, and then the dance on Saturday. And something we're doing, we co-op our sports with Cerro Gordo. So Dr. Widener, the Cerro Gordo superintendent, and I have worked really hard with our administrative teams to create that extended collaboration for our students. So beyond sports, we also have our band members are part of a collaborative marching band. So the band directors from each school district are with our marching band out on the field. We went ahead and opened up our Bement dance to any Cerro Gordo student who wanted to attend our dance. The students who are on our sports teams and in the activities from Cerro Gordo and Bement were all in our parade. And then the Cerro Gordo middle and high school students who aren't involved in an activity that rode in the parade, we invited them over to watch and support their classmates. And then that's been reciprocated this week. So today, the Cerro Gordo homecoming parade is this afternoon at 1 o'clock. Our athletes and cheerleaders and marching band members will be in their parade with them. And then the rest of our middle and high school students will also go to the parade to support their classmates. And then again, Cerro Gordo's homecoming dance is tomorrow night, and our students have that opportunity to go. Typically, if a student from a different school district comes to a dance, there's a permission form that needs to be signed and just some paperwork put in place. But we have made the decision to have that open collaboration between our two school districts for dances as well.
Very good. When it comes to collaboration, obviously Cerro Gordo and Bement schools already work probably pretty well together, and I know that you and Dr. Widener are very familiar with each other, obviously, with the your connections to Monticello. So I'm sure that's a partnership that just flows incredibly naturally from a lot of areas.
It really does, Seth. We worked together for 13 years in the Monticello School District as building principals. And my role primarily was as the preschool through first grade principal, and then she was the second through third grade principal. And so making sure that as our students started in the district and then transitioned into second and third grade at her building, we did a lot of work having our staff members collaborate, making sure that there was consistency as far as expectations, so that parents who had children in more than one building could expect consistent expectations. So as superintendents now, it takes it to the next level because we share staff members. My industrial tech teacher starts his day in Cerro Gordo. Her ag teacher starts her day here in Bement, so that we can offer those classes for our students. So it truly is beyond the athletic co-op. It goes into the classroom as well. And we make sure, things like our district has had an established e-learning plan through ISBE. Cerro Gordo has not had that. So I shared everything that I have with her because if there were an incident where we needed to cancel school because of weather, but we're prepared to do an e-learning day, my students and staff would have that option, whereas hers wouldn't have, and they would have had to go the extra day into the summer. So we're trying to fine tune those details. for Cerro Gordo, students attending dances have to be passing all of their classes. So we adopted that policy here in Bement as well, so that it's consistent between both schools.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Very good. Very good. Any other ways, Mrs. Vogt, that you and your peers at Cerro Gordo collaborate that we maybe don't think of often? I know you mentioned the classroom. I mean, that seems like an obvious collaboration, but any other ways that you collaborate that maybe the general public doesn't always see? Anything like that?
So, like, we just had the Cerro Gordo staff put out information about they call it biddy ball, but an opportunity for a basketball camp for the younger students in our district. The cheerleaders do the same, where they have a cheerleading camp, and students from both school districts are invited. And so it really helps establish the relationship with our students at a young age. And Seth, I have to tell you, sometimes when I hear concerns from the community about, make sure we don't close our school, etc., I don't feel like that's ever going to be part of my plan as the superintendent here. But I know there are hard feelings between the adults in the community, and I just wish they could get in and see how well our students work together and get along and support each other. Last year, we had an opportunity to go to Cerro Gordo to hear a speaker who was a survivor of the Holocaust. So it was Bement, DeLand, Weldon, and Cerro Gordo all hearing the speaker in Cerro Gordo's auditorium. So, we absolutely plan to collaborate whenever we can for the benefit of our students.
Very good, Mrs. Vogt. Well, I'll tell you what, let's move along here. Again, Mary Vogt is the superintendent of Bement Schools, our guest on the phone here for this morning. We appreciate her time as always. Mrs. Vogt, you mentioned you had a school board meeting earlier this week. What else kind of came out of that? I know e-learning has been somewhat of a buzzword the last several years. It's been an innovation, in a way, as districts, when you come up on snow days or, just having to use emergency days for whatever reason, for perhaps facilities fail in some manner. You're still able to do some learning in some capacity. It's not the classroom, obviously, but talk about that a little bit with us.
Absolutely. So last year we had a situation in the community where there was a water main break and there was a boil order. It happened over the weekend, but I was planning ahead for that Monday. If we wouldn't have been able to be in school to use the bathrooms, if we wouldn't have been able to use the water for cooking and drinking, that's not a safe environment. And so my thought had been to, plan for that e-learning opportunity and make sure that our students could still receive instruction, even if it wasn't in the classroom. So there's an example of what we might have needed to use the plan for beyond the weather. Otherwise, most of the time it will be because of the weather. And what I shared with my board was I don't have a steadfast belief of I will never take a snow day or I will always take a snow day. I'm going to evaluate each situation as it comes. Most of my students ride the bus to get to school. Most of my staff do not live in the town of Bement. So I need to keep in mind, even if the weather looks okay later in the day, how is that ride going to be getting to school? And if we can plan ahead, if all of our middle school and high school students are one-to-one, they have Chromebooks with them every day. Our elementary classes have Chromebooks in the classroom. So there was a day last year where we knew ahead of time we are going to take an e-learning day. So those elementary students were sent home with their Chromebooks. The primary grades were sent home with work packets. And interestingly, I had a staff member say to me last week, an e-learning day isn't the same as the students sitting in the class learning. But if we have to come back to school on June 1st to make up that day, there's going to be less instruction happening in June than there will be remotely. And I really appreciated that comment from the staff member.
Sure. And Mrs. Vogt, how about just e-learning, from a technology standpoint? I mean, obviously, you've got to have the infrastructure in place. You talk about those Chromebooks and those sorts of things. iPads, a lot of districts are turning to those these days. Has Bement Schools had to, in terms of just updating those things or making sure that they're available, have you had to do some work there to make e-learning possible for your students?
We have, and last year we took stock and inventory of the technology in the district. So on a daily basis, our network, the guts of our network had not been updated for about 30 years. So we spent time this summer getting our network updated, and we have, a technology plan that will now, every freshman will receive a new Chromebook that they will use through their 4 years of high school. And then for kindergarten through 8th grade, or I apologize, incoming 8th grade. So those Chromebooks will travel with them from year to year. So as long as there's no damage, then they'll get to keep using, that Chromebook that's assigned to them. And then we have used some grant funds to provide hotspots for families who are not able to access the internet at home, because we don't want any student to lose out on instruction if they don't have internet access at home. So we've used grant funds, and I have 10 families who have a hotspot that I pay the monthly fee for.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah.
That's that's awfully nice of you, Mrs. Vogt. Holy cow, to make that opportunity happen for them.
Well, and so interestingly, this year we are also offering a number of dual credit classes that have not been offered in previous years. And we are also using funds to pay for those dual credit classes. So our students could graduate with 12 college credit hours. And I did have a parent reach out to me and say, my child's taking 2 dual credit classes. We just use our phones as a hotspot. Is there any way we can use a hotspot provided by the school so that we don't use up our data? Absolutely. So, using the way the grant is written, it's to support student education when they're learning from home. Mm-hmm. And so I'm happy to help facilitate that.
That's really nice of you. How about that? Well, Mrs. Vogt, as it relates to, e-learning and just making sure that your policies, I guess, are kind of in line. What's, anything else on that component of this conversation from your meeting on earlier this week? I think you said Wednesday to me earlier in the week. How about that?
It was Wednesday. So that's something that's interesting that my guess is the general public isn't aware of. I can't just, as a superintendent, say, here's my e-learning plan, and this is how we're going to do this. So the e-learning plans have to be renewed every 3 years with the State Board of Education, and there's a process that takes place. I have to notify our collective bargaining agreement, so our teachers association, teachers union. I have to notify all of my staff, certified and non-certified, about the plan. And then I have to notify our families. And then we had a public hearing for anyone to provide comment. Then I send everything to the Regional Office of Education, who will approve or deny, and then it gets filed with the State Board of Education. So there are a lot of layers that go into nearly every decision that a school board makes. The budget. You don't just say, here's our budget for the year. You could post a tentative budget. You have a budget hearing, and then have everything approved through the State Board of Education, and then file it in your county clerk's offices. So a lot of layers, a lot of decisions, and a lot of communication that needs to happen to make sure that the policies and procedures are being followed in the school district.
Sure. Very good. Very good. Mrs. Vogt, I'll tell you what, let's take a time out here. We'll come back with some more. Before we do that, where do folks go to learn about all things Bement schools?
www.bement.k12.il.us.
Very good. That's, again, Mrs. Mary Vogt, Superintendent of Bement Schools, our guest on the phone. More to come with her here on the WHOW Morning Show.
WHOW. The annual Clinton Apple and Pork Festival to benefit the DeWitt County Museum's C.H. Moore Homestead is this Saturday and Sunday on the Homestead grounds on Business Highway 51 on Clinton's north side. Tour the museum and enjoy the over 30 food booths that are operated by local nonprofit groups to support their efforts throughout the year. The entire community gets involved with events on the square and all over town. Come to Clinton this Saturday and Sunday for a step back in time and tune into the Big 1520 across Central Illinois, 92.3 FM in DeWitt County and 106.5 FM in McLean County. WHOW all weekend for expanded coverage. Brought to you by Clinton Eagles north of the Clinton Square. Join them for breakfast at 8 a.m. Saturday morning and a live band both Friday and Saturday night that weekend. Encore Thrift Store in Clinton, employing people with disabilities. We're worth the trip. And Walker Tire and Exhaust in Clinton. Competitively priced consumer, commercial, farm, industrial, and OTR tires.
For the latest in Central Illinois agricultural news, visit IllinoisFarmRadio.com. Get updated information on markets, weather, ag news, local interviews with NAFB farm broadcaster Jared White, and much, much more. All at IllinoisFarmRadio.com.
Connexus will provide local, reliable, affordable, and speed of light fiber internet to Clinton. Get on the install list now by clicking the Connexus icon at DeWittDailyNews.com. Fiber internet is coming to Clinton. Get on the install list now.
Your own home without the maintenance. If you're 55 or better, a beautiful Liberty Village villa could be yours. This is Erin, and I invite you to come take a tour of our move-in ready villa. Click the Liberty Village icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
Simply the finest.
DeWittDailyNews.com is the area's leading local news source 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get the latest local news, obituaries, police blotter, weather forecast, and more with no paywall. Head to DeWittDailyNews.com to get the local information you need to know.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence, and the morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Again, my guest on the morning show, Mary Vogt, is the superintendent of Bement Schools. Mrs. Vogt, it's budget time for schools. How's Bement's budget looking these days?
We are looking healthy and strong as far as our budget is concerned. I think I had mentioned last year how much I appreciated the work that Dr. Greenwood did to turn the finances around in our school district. So last year, our fund balances, we were predicting that we would end with about $4 million in the bank. We actually ended with about $6 million. So I know my neighbors down the road are talking in the 20 million. That's never going to be us. But the fact that I have a balanced budget, it's a healthy budget, and the future still looks good. With, I'm not sure if anyone else has mentioned this yet, but CPPRT had been up for a few years. It always cycles, so now it's on that downward trend again. But being a district that does not rely heavily on CPPRT, it should not hurt us as much as it could. So we'll still be okay. We're still projecting we'll end the school year, in about that $6 million range of money in the bank. And, we have some projects we're looking at. I've mentioned we're looking at the possibility of air conditioning our large gym. We have a chimney that needs to be repaired. So we're going to keep some money in the bank for a rainy day, but then also focus on some building improvements.
Mrs. Vogt, when it comes to, you talked about those revenue sources, what makes up most of the revenue for your budget in a given year?
So we do rely on local sources, so our tax levy, and we have an opportunity this year to sell bonds. And because our finances are healthy, what we're doing is working with King Financial Consulting, and we're going to sell those bonds and buy them ourselves, and then earn the interest from buying and selling our own bonds. Mm-hmm. We can do that without raising the tax rate, so taxpayers will see no difference, and then it should help us get a few $1,000s in the bank that we can use for those projects that we're planning.
When it comes to Mrs. Vogt, you mentioned CPPRT and also the 1 cent sales tax dollars. Those greatly help a budget, particularly 1 cent sales tax dollars, where you can alleviate taxes, you can address facilities. Really gives you some opportunities in those areas. Talk a little bit about the 1 cent sales tax dollars in particular. I'm sure Bement doesn't get a great deal of that money, but the money you do get, how far does it go for you?
And you're right. We do not get a lot. Let's see here. I'm estimating we will get about $60,000. So again, not a lot. CPPRT, we are hoping to get about $170,000. So we're not as reliant on those funds as we are as our money from the levies, from the local tax levies. But when we do get that money, like I said, the sales tax money, we can use to help offset the cost of those building projects that we have planned. We're also applying through the State Board of Education. We are applying for the school maintenance grant. That is a $50,000 grant that then as a district we have to match funds. So we'll hopefully be able to use that grant in some of our building funds to help pay for our projects that we have planned.
Mm-hmm. For sure. You mentioned, Mrs. Vogt, when CPPRT dollars are down, does that impact your budget? You mentioned you don't get as much as Monticello, your neighbor to the north, obviously, but when those dollars are down, do you have to adjust and maneuver to make sure that things fit and everything works?
So when it comes to CPPRT, I look at that as kind of bonus money. Don't build my budget around CPPRT. I build my budget around the funds that I know we have coming, and I know what amount we have coming. So between the EBF, the evidence-based funding from the state, and the levy, I plan on that money, and then as the additional funds come in that are more of a variable, grant funds, I know how much we get. So again, planning for budgeting the CPPRT for certain projects, I don't tend to do that.
I see. Gotcha. Very good. Well, Mrs. Vogt, we could probably talk a little bit longer on budgeting. Perhaps we'll do that another time. But in the meantime, where do folks go to learn about all things Bement Schools?
www.bement.k12.il.us.
Very good, Mrs. Vogt. It's always good to talk to you. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next month. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks so much, Seth.
That is Mrs. Mary Vogt, Superintendent of Bement Schools. My guest on the phone. The morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Network news comes your way next on the WHOW Morning Show.